Snapshots of a Nonviolent Struggler by Hacohen. She looked me in the eyes as she made the peace sign with her fingers. I held the gun. Like a mass pirate, I was part of the overtaking of a ship in the high seas. On board were 22 peace activists, including Karen DeVito. Almost a decade after the event, I discovered a YouTube clip of a woman from Vancouver, Canada, explaining that what brought her to the Flotilla project is her deep commitment to nonviolence. She was born in the United States and is old enough to remember the civil rights struggle. As a student in the 1960s, she participated in anti-war marches and stood with fellow African students who were discriminated against, and stood with them in the continued belief that nonviolence is a way to solve these problems, and is why she was attracted to the project, with a deep commitment to nonviolence in the tradition of Gandhi, Mandela, and Martin Luther King. The trajectory of history bends towards justice, hoping to see justice in Gaza in her lifetime. In Karen DeVito's declaration of intent, she is committing herself to the practice of nonviolence and participation in physical acts of resistance. A nonviolent raid of Gaza, or an invasion, breaking the invisible border of the sea without the permission of the authority occupying the waters, controlling the waters, and the access to the ports. The flotilla came in the aftermath of the Mavi Marmara incident that resulted in 11 deaths and many lessons for waging global nonviolent resistance maneuvers and resisting them. The nature of the game changed to what is described as image fair. In image fair, winning and losing of the conflict take place in the minds of the people and their perceptions, the way they view the conflict, who they believe is on the side of justice. The conflict is over the legal implications and the effect of the events on diplomatic relations and standings. What happens in reality, in the middle of the ocean, is just a spectacle, a boat show, of little strategic interest. The aftermath could lead to sanctions, financial reparations, a break in diplomatic ties, or persecution in the international criminal justice system, and could hurt industries such as tourism, science, and international trade. One of the biggest obstacles is recognition of responsibility in the symbolic sense, and in the internal polarization that campaigns of non-violence have. As I looked Karen DeVito in the eyes through the black mask covering my face, I could see no fear. She was driven to do the same action research as a practitioner of non-violent resistance, but in that one moment in time it was black and white, two teams trying to capture the same flag, and on that engagement the boat did not break the barrier, and the authority carrying the guns arrested the activists. The engagement is not finite, with a set and agreed upon rules of conduct and clear lines. The activists were resisting the naval restrictions, which is part of a greater humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and in the context of the persistent, intractable conflict. In long struggles, it is important for the morale to secure some tangible wins. Changes in the restrictions of the policy on open waters could be just that. The preparations and the aftermath of such a spectacle are critical to the resistance movement, as it creates engagement and attention. In coverage of such an event, the emphasis is less on the size of the boat or the interactions, or the snapshot of the soldier holding a gun to the fearless woman, creating the international gesture of peace with her fingers. The actions are intended to raise awareness for the problem that requires resistance, to emphasize the humanitarian crisis, to create dialogue, create a swarming effect on social media and viral content, placing the subject of the nonviolent resistance campaign in the center and not just the humanitarian mission or the provocation. It is just as important to emphasize the message of the voyage and to develop a positive narrative of nonviolent action. There are few images online of the incidents. Memory cards are often confiscated, and it was more difficult in 2011 to broadcast live, and the Israeli Navy uses electronic warfare to block off certain communication channels. Karen DeVito's actions triggered in me compassion and empathy. The members of the flotilla were villainized in Israeli society. After the Marmara, they were high alert for violence. By sticking to non-violence in the face of physical retaliation, she chipped away at the perception and held a mirror to my face as an aggressor. Years later, she would have been proud of me at the protest against the deportation of refugees. This time I was not holding a gun. I was the citizen of the world protesting transnational policies. My way to spread compassion and empathy was to walk around the protest hugging the refugees from Sudan and Eritrea who fled horrors and genocide. Hugs are universally recognized, and it was a way of showing solidarity and fearlessness towards the black refugees. After the end of the ceremony, I played guitar on the spot where Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, using drama and musical performance skits and pranks, singing "Rabin was killed, who is next in line," as people made their way home from the square in the heart of the country. On the way to the protest, I had started a mock crowdfunding campaign. The Me Too movement exploded after the Harvey Weinstein scandal exploded on The New Yorker, describing the involvement of Israeli business intelligence firm Black Cube, owned by my brother-in-law, for a small sum of $1.5 million. In the campaign, I was going to offset this involvement by raising $3 million and using it at the battered women's shelter, like the one I volunteer at in Haifa, using the money to grow cannabis in the shelter for the welfare of the women. Due to the spreading this provocation, I was taken out of a WhatsApp group of a veteran SEAL surfer competition, the last army-related group that I was in. I had already gotten removed from a Facebook group because I was asking about the suicide of Ori Bar-Khan, and during this time I had gone outside of the SEAL military base playing guitar, posting live videos, calling them Wild and Alive Radio Wave, a translation on Bar-Chai and Gal, my name and also the name of his teammate, who died in the scuba diving incident. That night, as I ran from the spot where Rabin was shot to the organized protest bus taking me to my car in the artist village of Enhad, I got in an argument with my teammate from the army. A new group was created, and long story short, from here to there, I sent a message that I was going to hang myself like Bar-Chai outside of my old officer's home in Caesarea, and I shut my phone and continued home on the bus. I wanted to know how everyone would react if such an event happened in our team. It was a drill. On my way home, I wanted to stop and tell my parents that everything is okay, and when I arrived, the police were waiting for me. I was aggressively arrested that night, cuffed hands and legs, and taken to the police station near the place I had pretended to be at. I continued to play and began using Facebook to tell the story of the police brutality, but the message was not clear. I understood the importance of networking in a struggle and became involved in the medical cannabis patients movement, organizing a sit-in in Tel Aviv which lasted 4 days, in which I slept very little, and in the days that followed the protest, I was hospitalized against my will. Before and during the sit-in, I spoke with Professor Eddie Kaufman, reflecting on the action research I was participating in, anthropologically and as a scholar of nonviolent resistance and social movements. To me, the medical cannabis protest was a prison for many of the major protests due to the wide demographic of issues that participants receive medical cannabis for. I wanted to understand the connection between the real world, activists on the ground, and the visual perception. Like many of today's struggles, much like the Arab Spring, it is a leaderless, decentralized system with no clear hierarchy. I do not represent the official event, but they can share my posts and live feeds if they wish. It creates a situation where you are speaking to the unknown masses, leaving a digital imprint on the cloud as a supporter of a struggle, tagged as such, while at the same time broadcasting to people from your personal life, unprepared to be exposed to hours and hours of protest footage. By the time I had left hospital, large amounts of content from the protests were deleted from Facebook. I had intended to use and to create a more comprehensible narrative and spread all the knowledge that were acquired by unionizing as patients, creating a social network infrastructure, forced to create a list of demands and to formulate opposition to the reform, and an emphasis to the medical question in the cannabis debate. When I realized that on top of everyone trying to fuck with me, Facebook took my content, I wanted to recreate the protest by myself and spent 3 days next to Rambam Hospital in Haifa trying to rekindle the spirit of the protest and all the video content that I had produced. As they say in the SEALs, what you don't do well, you do again. I felt a sense of failure. The 4-day protest did not really receive a lot of attention, and I tried to bring together all the things I was protesting together. There was a connection between the gas rigs, the cancer, the wars, the PTSD, and cannabis, and this was related to the police brutality and their inability to treat people in an imbalanced state, and the horrors of psychiatric hospitals and the modern treatment. All of this gets juggled between the real world and the online social platforms. All the transcripts and developments of modern social struggles can be interpreted and understood through what gets posted, the comments, and the private group messages. The summer of 2018 was filled with protest movements, and people were feeling alienated by the system and coerced by it. I used my personal protest as an Anthropocene of the problem facing society and as a playground or battlefield for non-violent protest, trying to map all the aspects that determine whether or not a campaign will have an impact and if it will break the shackles and reach the promised land when the demands of the struggles are met.